Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining the Canadian State of the Market webinar update today. My name is Nathan Richmond, and I'm the Global Placement Leader for Canada. Today I will be your host and also joined with a panel of our specialists. So we're aiming today for about 60 minutes of content for you. Presentation is scheduled for about 45 to 50 minutes, followed by 10 to 15 minutes to Q&A session to answer any questions. So at the moment, all participants have been placed on mute and the lines have been held, but please feel free to answer questions throughout this presentation by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and simply open the panel up, submit your question, and that'll come through to us to try and answer at the end of the session. We have also received a number of questions throughout the registration process, so a number of those we do cover in our content, but we do have some of those to answer at the end as well for us all. We're also going to take a bit of interactive approach through the session. We're going to ask you some polling questions. So as we come to the conclusion of each section, we're going to ask you some polling questions. So to be able to vote on them as we go through, and we'll collect the responses as we go through the session. The session is being recorded and will be distributed and available following the next session. So if we just click through to today's agenda. But as we just, I guess, before we start that, really on behalf of all of us, I'd also just like to express a very heartfelt thank you to all of our frontline workers everywhere at the moment, continuously and tirelessly providing their effort and the essential goods through these extraordinary times. And so thank you for each of those, showing us very strong dedication and perseverance. We do truly appreciate you through this period. So today, joining me and the subject matter experts, each of these individuals are going to bring you a slightly different perspective to our discussion. But with me today is Andrea Orvis. Andrea is our Managing Director based in our Vancouver office. And Andrea is going to be sharing her perspectives on directors and officers, risk and insurance. Ruby Rai, Cyber Practice Leader for Canada, is joining us to provide cyber risk update and following a number of the requests that we had actually through the registration process about cyber risk. So lots of interested people around cyber. So Ruby will walk us through that section. And Grant Williamson, who's the Managing Director, but also our National Corporate Segment Leader, will share his perspectives on the key strategies needed to help navigate through the market, which is really in the next gear of this market cycle. So we just click through to the next slide. I'll get started with a global insurance market overview, covering some of the market dynamics, pre and post COVID-19 impacts. And then I'd like to share with you some of the insights around property and casualty and the marketplace itself. So I'll just mention as well as we go, there will be QR readers as we have each of the title slides come through for each of the speakers if you do wish to connect on LinkedIn. So before we discuss the impacts of COVID-19 on the insurance markets, I think it's really important to also set the scene of some brief overview of what the conditions were like prior to the pandemic. So capital supply had been very strong, although we had started to see a number of reductions in capital coming in over the 18-19 year-end periods, with the likes of new and alternative capital that had been coming into the market slow down a bit, and that's really been as the result of claims activity. And really, I guess, the fact that alternative capital typically doesn't like the uncertainty of the loss activity that we've seen out of the last few years. So profit has been a real challenge over the last couple of periods as well for the major insurance companies, and that's due to a number of factors, but predominantly it's escalating claims and operating costs. This has begun to improve, seeing the results for Q1 2020. The profits are starting to come back. But the view from the insurance companies is certainly that they're far from where they need to be, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. Insurers are certainly adjusting their perspectives on risk issues. Specific industries and certain coverage availability, they're adjusting this by reducing the amount of capacity or capital available for any one risk or any one sector, and certainly restricting elements of cover. And all of that is in an attempt to reduce the loss volatility in their portfolios. Tax and regulatory reform are also driving a much more conservative behaviour in the insurance and reinsurance companies, and certainly around issues such as environmental social governance and the increasing capital requirement conversation that's pronounced here in Canada as well, which is really a good conversation for the industry to be having, because it is about sustainability in the industry, but it's also difficult because there is costs that insurance companies are potentially having to take on to strengthen their capital, and of course that gets passed through to customers. So I guess in summary, for the majority of our clients, the market was already in a tough and very challenging state, and this has resulted in the pendulum swinging from the enjoyable premium rates of Q4 2015 through, I guess, the transitional period, as you can see on the screen, through 17-18 through to Q1 2020, where global insurance pricing on a composite basis has increased by 14% as we tracked by our Marsh Global Insurance Market Index. I guess for me, the couple of call outs on this, it is the largest ever year-on-year increase we've seen, but also for me, it's the pace of change over those last 3 quarters that we're starting to see, and that's when you roll those prices up, it is a global composite view that's pretty significant change in the market and really a pace that we haven't seen before. So we click through the next slide and moving into today. The impact of COVID-19 on the insurance industry has been multi-layered, and much like all of your businesses, insurance companies have had to quickly pivot and reimagine how to service clients in a very different operating environment. So as far as the main dynamics we're seeing in today's environment, I'll start with how the insurance companies have been focusing on their clients. We're experiencing wide and varied levels of responsiveness from the markets. The majority of insurance companies have been very proactive with their communication and their flexibility and ensuring clients receive that contract certainty at their renewal date. They've worked pretty well with the brokers and to provide very clear and punctual advice, along with mobilising essentially overnight as an industry to transition to a working from home environment and to allow business as usual to continue. We've also seen the other side of the coin. We have seen a small number of insurers that have frankly really struggled to, my words would be, to remember to put the client first in their service delivery. So a little bit of internal focus has certainly come into some of the insurance companies over this period. In respect of coverage, immediately we began to see insurers pivot and adjust following the impacts of COVID-19. The industry is currently forecasting some huge ranges in respect to what the COVID-19 losses may look like. These range from anywhere from 22 billion to 100 billion. But through the insights from our reinsurance business, Guy Carpenter, we are able to advise that some of the current reported losses are circa about 4 billion into the market at this early stage. And I'll stress that it is an early stage as far as loss reporting goes. So to put these type of numbers in some context, I think the easiest thing to look at is maybe the World Trade Center disaster. And that was an event that certainly changed the insurance market. And the total losses from that event were circa 40 billion. So even if you take roughly the midway point between the 100 billion estimate, it's still COVID-19 will have a significant impact on the industry with losses in excess of the World Trade Center. The majority of insurers are introducing exclusionary language for COVID-19 and or broader communicable diseases onto the policies where they perceive that there is exposure for these risks. And in regards to clients that are needing to declare more significant negative impact to their revenues, for example, the markets have been relatively non-committal at a portfolio level, but have signalled strong intentions to support our clients as best they can on a case-by-case basis when clients have had significant reductions in revenues to declare. I guess one of the challenges that we all face with these adjustments is the lack of clarity in a lot of the circumstances as to when our clients are going to be able to return to the previous revenue levels, and therefore what consideration can be offered at this point by insurers. But we are working through that and also starting to focus more around adjustable insurance policies for business interruption, for example. Outside of virus-related claims, some of the other external factors have been, obviously, there's short-term underlying margins are experiencing some negative impacts with lower bond yields, etc., and a slightly higher operating costs as well for some of the short-term contingencies that have had to come into the market. Some of these would be examples of business support services that were previously housed in the likes of India, where the speed and the nature of their lockdown has caused some issues for some of the insurance companies. Most of the industry contacts, I think, agree that it's too early to really ascertain the midterm impacts from COVID-19 and how the market will respond. But we are also seeing already some cancellations in small to medium-sized enterprise businesses and also auto product line, for example. So the longer term implications on policy volumes and therefore premium income to insurers is also a concern for the insurance markets. But this may well be just contained to really, I guess, a function of the duration for any countrywide shutdown and or any ensuing recessionary impact that follows that. That said, the reinsurance sector does have a very strong and arguably very conservative capital base, which should provide some insulation from those impacts to the customers. In regards to a changing risk profile, as the pandemic makes obviously unprecedented marks on businesses across the board, organisations are forced to adapt to the interruption and the changes triggered by the pandemic. Immediate and long-term implications will result from this, and I think some of the increased or new liabilities and risks that are emerging, such as increased employee or third-party liabilities, increased D&O liabilities, which Andrea will talk to some of those, through to workers' comp and the working from home environment, through to cyber and security threats that come with that as well. So a number of new risks that I wouldn't really put into the traditional new risk category. I think there's a variation of existing risks in a new landscape to consider. So the insurance landscape will essentially remain very challenging. It will remain pretty fluid at the moment as insurers really strive to understand, assess and set appropriate price and coverage to ensure the industry remains sustainable into what is a very uncertain future at the moment. This is forcing insurers to again reevaluate and look harder at systemic risk issues. And it's also the conversation that we want to start with all of our clients, and we're encouraging our clients to also look more at a risk-based landscape where maybe the traditional risk matrix of individual isolated one-off risks that we consider, we really need to change that thinking to much more scenario-orientated risks and combination of risks all triggering at the same time and being interconnected as they have proven in the pandemic. I'll just share with you as well, at Marsh & McLennan, we believe really the future solution required around pandemics for our clients really needs to be moved and to be based on a more public-private partnership model. And as such, we have been actually lobbying a body of work around the globe to this effect. We've presented to over 15 governments so far, including presenting a proposal yesterday here in Canada. So I'll just move through to out of the general market and into property and casualty, and just sharing some thoughts around what we see in the property market. So I'll just put this slide in context for us before we get into some detail. So the rates, premium rate changes here shown are really just some averages across the portfolios that we manage. They're really published as a guide, and clearly your individual outcomes will be very different based on your individual risk profiles. They're based on clients that have not suffered any losses, and clearly given that everything's either a 5 or a 0, they have been rounded just for simplicity to demonstrate where the market sits. But I think also put them in context. If we look at the Marsh Global Insurance Market Update in the index, it's tracked property rates increasing by 15% for Q1 2020. So Canada is certainly running higher on a percentage increase basis than the global average, but in line with the US and the Pacific region, which are running about 21 and 23% respectively. I think the point to note here is that the historic rates in Canada for property have been significantly lower than, for example, in the Pacific region. So arguably the underlying cost of property risk here in Canada is still outperforming or is more cost effective for clients than those in other regions. I'll just also touch on a little bit about insurer behaviours. There is a real continued focus on technical rating, and when you hear technical rating, what that means is essentially, the insurance companies are now rating for all elements of risk that they can consider. Previously, items such as sublimits or underlying reinsurance costs, policy extensions, they were simply being included or discounted, if you like, to meet the market competitive level of premium. This is no longer. They are now starting to charge for all of those coverage elements. So Grant will cover off a little bit about how we can look more critically at the policy coverage and expand how we can jointly manage those dynamics, along with another dynamic that is prevalent now, which is much longer lead times required for the underwriters. Underwriters have significantly increased scrutiny and internal referral processes, and they are causing delays, and things are taking longer in the insurance market to negotiate for our clients. We've seen significantly reduced capacity per risk, or what we refer to as their line size that they offer customers. We're seeing reduced policy limits, we're seeing reduced sub-limits within policies. And all of this is in order to reduce that volatility. Some examples from renewals that we've just worked through with our clients for the first of the month. We've had a number where we've had previously one insurance company offering 100% of the risk to a customer and reducing that offer down to a 15% or 25% capacity level. So significant changes in capacity. Typically, the insurance companies, we're working very, very hard with them to get early lines of sight and early visibility on these kind of changes. But frankly, they're not always known until relatively close to renewal, depending on again, coming back to those internal referrals and the processes within the insurance companies now to review risk. Risk exposure reports and risk engineering work. We are seeing a really strong focus on this from the insurance companies and making sure that recommendations that have been made around improving risk quality have been activated and completed. And we are seeing insurers non-renew customers' policies if these are not completed at times. So very important to manage those with your broker. Now, we're also starting to see some requests and requirements for COVID-19 kind of operational preparedness information to be made available and articulated as part of your underwriting submission. If we think about coverage, we are seeing coverage restrictions. It's not just the exclusionary language that I spoke about earlier on COVID-19 or communicable disease. We are seeing pressure on waiting period increases, a real focus on business interruption coverage and contingent business interruption valuations. And we're seeing affirmative cyber exclusions coming into the property space, and I guess trying to clarify that grey area around which coverages sit which policies for property and cyber, and Ruby will touch a little bit on that for us as well. We're seeing deductibles being increased, and this is a general sentiment across the insurance market that the deductibles need to increase. And to give you some context of size and scale, if you took an average manufacturing customer, may have had a $10,000 deductible previously. That's, the conversations we'll be talking about a $25,000 retention now. If you talked about real estate customers where maybe they've had 25,000, that might go to 50,000. And we've had a number of examples where insurers are even pushing those real estate customers to 100,000 or 250,000 any one claim. And also water damage is a strong focus in the deductible space for real estate customers as well, and really getting some pressure around 50,000, 100,000, $250,000 in regards to the deductible increases required. And I guess I'd say insurers are really now scrutinising every policy term from the front page to the very last page of the insurance policy. So what do we expect to see in the next period, in the next few quarters? Markets will continue to push for rate increases, and coming into the Q3, Q4, where clients have seen rate increases in 2019, we certainly anticipate that there will be a second round of premium increases come through again on top of last year's increases. We're seeing a lot of restructuring of policies being required by clients due to, again, that reduction in capital, reduction in capacity being offered. So some examples would be where previously a customer had a single insurance company write their risk. We're now requiring multiple insurance companies to share that risk, if you like. So maybe 3, maybe 4 insurance companies. Where clients have previously enjoyed full value or total insured value basis as to how they insure, we're now seeing a number of clients move to a loss limit. And for example, some of in our larger client space, where some of those limits are reducing from the likes of a $2 billion limit down to a $500 million limit, or $1 billion down to $350 million. So quite significant changes to structure. And certainly, work with you around how do we move to those kind of a basis. What's the risk engineering work that needs to take place beforehand? What's the risk assessment that needs to be considered to consider what might be your maximum foreseeable loss if you have multiple locations, for example. It's moving from ability to insure all locations for full value to a much more risk-based approach to that. And we've also seen clients have to move to utilising not just insurance companies that participate on their program from $0 through to the policy limit, but also move to layered structures where insurers may be offering capacity in blocks of $5 million and stacking those on top of each other to get to the sum insured. So again, a different structure being used. And I guess with increased restructuring of programs to deal with the lack of capacity in the market, we are starting to see some non-concurrency in the pricing. So the different layers starting to charge prices that are not linear up the program and away from the risk exposure, and also some non-concurrency of policy wordings as well. And that's just simply insurers not willing to move away from their internal guidance. So finally, we're experiencing a pretty hardline approach with the insurance markets, and again, Grant Williamson will cover off some of the strategies to prepare for that. So we just move to casualty and what we're seeing in the casualty market. Look, again, rates, same comments as the previous slide, offset against the global composite, which is about 5%. So again, seeing some higher traces in Canada. The insurer behaviours are all very similar to the property space. There is a reluctance to provide extensions, certainly significant reductions in capacity along with rate rises. There's a real focus on clients with US exposures. So we're seeing a significantly increased premium rating coming from the US markets and US exposures. And that's mostly in the excess and umbrella space. And it's a very dynamic part of the market, and we're working closely with our US colleagues to ensure that we're advising our clients here in Canada about the real-time market shifts in the US casualty markets. There is still competition in the casualty market for new business growth. However, we are seeing a very distinct flight to quality in the risk selection from the insurers. So again, moving forward, what do we expect to see? Certainly more of the same. Insurers expect claim settlement levels to continue to rise, and this must, of course, be balanced in the casualty space with some of the reduction in the economic activity that we're also seeing in a number of locations currently. All of the contributing factors are really resulting in continued premium increases, but I guess rest assured that we're best placed to try and advise and set strategies to create market solutions to assist and navigate your organisations through this current market cycle. And I think it's really important to note that historically these tougher market cycles are shorter in duration than the soft market periods. And it's really important now more than ever to work with your broker and your placement specialist to develop a strong market engagement plan to navigate through this current market cycle. So on to the first of our polling questions. So the polling question is, which element of your insurance arrangement would you prioritise as the most important? Would it be 1, to contain any premium increases, 2, to maintain expiry policy coverage, 3, to maintain expiring deductible levels, 4, to maintain long-term insurer relationships? And with that, I'll now pass over to Andrea to share her perspectives on the directors and officers marketplace. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you, Nathan. I'll start by echoing some of Nathan's comments. The D&O insurance market was starting to harden significantly before COVID-19 arrived. This was largely driven by record high rates of securities litigation, especially in the United States. In the last 3 years, the rate of US securities litigation has nearly doubled. The Canadian litigation experience is less severe in comparison, but still record-breaking. 2019 saw a wave of cannabis-related claims that are largely insured in the Canadian D&O marketplace. The result was that premiums started to increase, particularly in the latter half of 2019. Significant majorities of all of our clients of all structures saw increases. US exposed companies saw increases of 30% even for good risks. Not-for-profit, Canadian only, and private companies saw slightly lower rates of increase, around 20%. Difficult classes included cannabis, life sciences, mining, and energy. It's important to note, though, that while specific risks and sectors have driven market change, all market participants will experience the fallout. Next slide, please. COVID-19 became unfortunate reality in North America in March. Suddenly, enterprises of all types are struggling to maintain business continuity while safeguarding employees and clients. Many of our clients are grappling with sharp decreases in income and potential solvency challenges. Financial markets are in turmoil, and traditional sources of financing may not be available. Publicly traded companies are further challenged by routine shareholder obligations. Are they going to be able to release their financial reports? Will the information released be timely and accurate and meet regulatory requirements? Are they going to continue to be able to provide shareholders with meaningful guidance or pay dividends? All of these are significant risk factors to D&O underwriters. We know that our clients are going to face challenges renewing their D&O programs going forward. The D&O market was difficult pre-COVID. All signs suggest we are entering a truly hard market, one that's changing on a monthly and even weekly basis. Next slide, please. In 2020, virtually all organizations, regardless of structure or industry, will see premium pressure. This will probably be coupled with one or more of the following adverse developments: deductible increases, limit reductions, coverage limitations, and even in extreme situations, non-renewal. Previously difficult industries continue to face challenges in 2020. As a result of COVID, we can also add the retail, hospitality, and real estate sectors to this list. Companies with adverse or deteriorating risk profiles will continue to see meaningful restrictions on their D&O renewals. In particular, companies domiciled in Quebec will face another extremely difficult year as the market continues to price the implications of the province's laws mandating that defense costs be in addition to policy limits. Marsh is still gathering data to quantify the pricing impacts. As yet, the data are not robust. Q1 is the quietest quarter for renewal activity, and the renewal results in that quarter largely predate COVID. What we can say is that Canadian companies are seeing steeper renewal increases than in 2019, and that increases for US exposed companies are rapidly accelerating. Next slide, please. In addition to premium increases, we're seeing deductible increases. While some insureds are exploring deductible as a means to mitigate premium, in many cases, insurers are forcing the issue. For example, many insurers are insisting on $1 million deductibles for US traded companies, regardless of size. Globally, insurers are carefully managing their limits. Long gone are the days of $25 million blocks, and 15 million are quickly disappearing. 10 million is frequently the maximum available, and there are some insureds for whom only 5 or even 2.5 million might be available from any given insurer. Coverage is also coming under some pressure. Core coverage remains generally broad, but there are restrictions creeping in. Examples include cyber exclusions. This is especially the case with crime and private and not-for-profit D&O. My colleague Ruby will expand on this. Financially distressed insureds are seeing insolvency-related exclusions, and many insureds are seeing restriction or removal of extended reporting periods, predetermined allocations, and sublimited coverages. We have not yet seen specific COVID exclusions in North America on D&O policies. However, this is happening in the UK, and we're closely monitoring the situation. So, looking ahead. Next slide, please. Our clients can expect continued COVID-related questions. Most insurers are focused on 3 topics. The first, employee customer safety. The second, the economic impacts of COVID on the organization. And for public companies, shareholder communication. Underlying a lot of these is a focus on solvency. Insurers anticipate a sharp uptick in insolvency over the coming months. Clients under financial stress should pay close attention to wage liabilities and tax and other remittances owed to governments. The ability to evidence this to insurers may lead to better coverage offerings. Our clients can expect continued pricing and retention increases and may have to accept lower limits. Coverage will be tightening. This may be imposed by the insurer or something insureds explore to mitigate premiums. It's important to understand your organization's coverage priorities so that you are in a position to make these decisions. Final note on premium financing. Historically, we advise against this for D&O policies. This is to prevent the financing company from controlling and possibly canceling the policy in the event of financial distress. However, we know that as premiums rise and our clients struggle financially, they may have no choice but to seek financing arrangements. Insureds need to clearly understand the pros and cons of doing this. Next slide, please. So now that I've forecast Armageddon, what can you do to navigate the storm? Your best tool in this market is to communicate early and often. Get your CFO and CEO involved. Have them meet with underwriters. Insurance is still very much a relationship business, and insurers value access to senior leadership. Use video conferencing for underwriting meetings. If possible, have one-on-one meetings with key markets or small group meetings. Large panel meetings are not as effective, particularly online. Get well in front of renewal timelines. Underwriter authority is being restricted. They have to jump through more hoops to get your risk approved, and they're doing this in a hardening market where they're flooded with submissions. Everything takes longer. Work with your Marsh client team to understand market dynamics, seek regular updates, The market and the world are changing rapidly. What may have been the case a month ago may not be the case 2 weeks from now. Explaining last-minute negative surprises to senior management can be difficult and unpleasant. Leverage the broader insurance relationship. Understand who are and are not your key markets. Finally, consider alternative structures. And back to my earlier point, understand what you want, what your coverage priorities are, what your organization truly needs versus simply wants. Is it entity-level risk transfer or personal asset protection? Deleting entity coverage or limiting some coverages to Side A only may make sense for your organization. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. So the next polling question is, what are the pricing expectations within your organisation for your D&O renewal? Is it 1, premium decreases, 2, flat pricing, 3, modest premium increases, and 4, significant premium increases? Thank you, Andrea. And with that, we'll pass through to Ruby to cover off cyber. So Ruby, over to you.
Thank you, Nathan, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Before we talk about the shift in the cyber insurance marketplace, I wanted to provide context in the underlying conditions that are influencing cyber insurance marketplace currently. So not very different from what my colleague Andrea shared for D&O. Cyber insurance market is inching closer to a firming market as we enter the second half of 2020. And what is contributing to this market shift? Couple of reasons. Next slide, please. There is the increase in digitization of services. There is the increased reliance on technology supply chain, and also an increase in cyber incidents, both from frequency and severity perspective. Now, adding to this mix is more scrutiny. Next slide, please. More scrutiny from the privacy regulators across multiple jurisdictions. Our Canadian privacy regulators are also paying close attention to both CCPA and GDPR, and we are anticipating that the new revisions that are being proposed for the Canadian privacy laws will give the privacy regulators more enforcement powers and avenues to bring forth class action litigation for privacy-related breaches. Moreover, after management liability, we feel that the privacy litigation is the new frontier for the global law firm. In Canada alone, we've seen hourly rate charged by privacy litigators can reach up to $1,000 an hour. And as we know that the onus of protecting customers or client-sensitive data remains with the data owners, such as yourselves, and we're not seeing any assurances for this risk from critical technology providers. These conditions are all contributing to the shift in cyber insurance marketplace. So let's talk briefly about 3 key areas that has been the focus of your Marsh cyber team lately. Next slide, please. First, it's the magnitude of ransomware incident and its longer-term impact on businesses. What we are seeing is that the attacks are more sophisticated, there's more business-related data that is being targeted, and the intention of the attack is to cause long-term operational disruption in addition to the cost of ransom. So the overall incident costs have increased per claim. Other key issues that we see come up frequently for our clients are war exclusions language. There continues to be inconsistency in the exclusionary language, but the good news is that there is robust coverage in the cyber insurance for nation-states attack, and cyber policies continue to pay losses. And third, of course, the silent cyber. We have seen majority of the insurance product lines introduce cyber exclusions. And it does not necessarily stop at property and casualty. We also see these come up under E&O, directors and officers, kidnap and ransom, crime, and the list goes on. What this has led to is coverage gaps for our clients, and something that we are working very closely with both Lloyd's syndicates and domestic markets to find solutions for our client. And it is important that we continue to discuss COVID-19 implications on cyber insurance as well. Next slide, please. We know that the pandemic has created more opportunities for cyber attackers. Businesses are at a greater risk for cyber attacks, technology failures, and business interruption. Cyber insurance can respond effectively to many of these elevated threats by providing pre-breach response services and loss mitigation services. So we highly encourage clients to take benefit of those. It is important to note that coverage does not always apply in every situation because there are built-in infrastructure exclusions in cyber policies. There could be limitations to voluntary shutdown coverage or limitations of other policy definitions. So it is important to pay close attention to the policy wording and if it fits your unique business operation. So please speak with your insurance advisor. We have not seen any COVID-related exclusions introduced under cyber policy, but where we have seen impact is in underwriting scrutiny. Clients are being asked to provide more information on concepts like how are you managing your access and device controls as more employees work remotely? Are you testing your incident reporting? As there is concern that claims reporting might suffer in these elevated situations. And if there's any budgetary restraint in maintaining or improving your cybersecurity standards. So how are these trends reflected in insurance rates? Next slide, please. The rates are starting to trend upwards towards the tail end of end of 2019 and into the second half of 2020. We are seeing an average of about 6% increase in cyber insurance premium for Marsh clients, irrespective of the industry. And this is predominantly due to claims frequency and severity that I mentioned earlier, which has negatively impacted cyber portfolios for many large primary insurance providers. Interestingly, the excess pricing is increasing faster than the primary pricing because excess insurance markets portfolios are smaller and the rates have been historically much lower. So we're seeing the biggest impact on excess pricing. And then there's the macro trend of rate needs in other lines of insurance, which is making and leading insurers to take a little bit more firmer approach on rate. Overall, insurers are reviewing their capacity with the goal to diversify their portfolio in terms of what industries do they write, where they scale back capacity, and increase retentions or rates, etc. And we are also starting to see pushback from insurers for new coverage asks, where previously we could get them at no additional premium. Markets are holding firm on that ask. But I want to assure you that it's not all doom and gloom. Next slide, please. The good news is there is capacity available in the cyber insurance marketplace. There's 20 plus markets writing cyber in both primary or excess capacity, where we can successfully build insurance towers up to 700 million. The coverage continues to be broad, and there's comfort among insurance carriers in maintaining broad cover. Cyber insurance policies are paying claims, and they're still holding good value. So what can our clients do to prepare? There are multiple things. Primarily, if you're preparing for your upcoming policy renewal, next slide, please, or if you're in the market as a new buyer, we recommend that you engage your key stakeholders, such as your CISO, your CIO, or director of IT, and get their insights on how you as a business are improving your security standards, reducing the attack surface, and improving overall business resiliency. From a risk management perspective, you can work with your Marsh advisor to understand what's covered under your cyber insurance policy before an incident occurs, especially at this time when companies are operating in a crisis mode. It's absolutely important to understand incident reporting protocol. Check if any business decisions have increased the threat landscape for your firm. Have you signed on a new technology vendor who continues to provide services? And what contracts are being negotiated? Something to pay attention to. And share that journey with your underwriters. Much like other lines of insurance, again, it's a relationship business. We're encouraging more underwriting calls, and it truly makes a difference in maintaining market relationships and support from your primary or excess carrier. And of course, we can't stress enough starting the process as early as possible. We continue to work with our clients and prepare them, evaluate terms and conditions on an ongoing basis. So we continue to encourage those discussions to navigate this marketplace. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you for that, Ruby. And so the next polling question: what is your biggest challenge in managing cyber risk? Is it 1, I don't understand what our organization's cyber risk is. It's difficult to quantify financial impact of cyber risk. I don't understand how cyber insurance can protect our organization. Increasing cyber technology So increasing technology spend has not reduced our organisation's cyber risk, or all of the above. Okay, so look, difficult insurance market, I think that's clear. It's coming through in all themes around property, casualty, D&O and cyber. But I'm going to pass now to Grant Williamson to help talk through some of the key strategies that we can help assist you with in managing some of these challenging dynamics. Grant, over to you.
Thanks, Nathan. So one thing just on this slide I want to point out to everybody is the little code at the bottom. And this will become more important in the next couple of slides when we have more of these. But for those that aren't familiar with these, if you take your phone, you open up the camera app and you scan over that code, it will give you a direct link. So for instance, this one will link you directly to me on LinkedIn, but we've got a couple of more coming further down the line here that are to client resources. So if everybody wants to get their phone ready for a couple of slides from now, that's how those work. Next slide, please, Stevie. Okay, so I want to take the next 5 or 7 minutes to walk through some of the strategies that we can use to ensure that collectively between you, our clients, and your client teams here at Marsh, that we're achieving the best result in what's obviously a very difficult market, which we've seen in the first half of this presentation. So what we've seen here is 10 items. Now, what these 10 items are what we've shared internally in our all-colleague calls at Marsh to our client teams in how to best approach the market and achieve the best results. So what we wanted to do today was to share these with you, our clients, so that you can see, because there's never been a better time to have honesty and transparency to make sure that we're all marching in the same direction. So if we run through these, there's nothing earth-shattering, new, or groundbreaking on this list, but it's never been more important than ever that we actually focus in and execute on each one of these items. So for instance, start the process early. We always say it, it goes without saying that we need to start early, but it's difficult. And it's difficult to make sure that we continually do it. I had a conversation with a client this morning who said we started the process early and we still got our terms late from the insurers. And that is happening. And it's something that we need to further communicate and work on to make sure that we do our part, we get the information early, we get to the markets early, and we get the terms by the deadlines that we need in order for you, our clients, to be able to make a decision in a very difficult environment that makes sense for you. So it's something that we're pushing very hard on and engaging at senior level with the insurers to make sure that they're meeting our timelines, that they are getting back to us. We're very cognizant of the environment given COVID. We're very cognizant of the fact that everybody's stretched, but we do need to meet these timelines for us to be able to execute the best deal in the marketplace for our clients. Have a detailed market engagement plan. Now more than ever, we need to make sure we're always on the same page. So our client teams need to make sure they're coming to you early and that they're engaging and that they're working through a very detailed plan on what we can expect over the coming months as we approach renewal dates. We're making sure we're marketing the program effectively. We're also too making sure that our teams internally are asking for ideas and support. It's no longer the case that one person has any and all answers and solutions. We definitely are taking the approach that more heads are better than one when it comes to this marketplace. And we're encouraging our colleagues internally to make use of the knowledge that we have within Marsh and to make sure that our clients can leverage that knowledge, most importantly. Prepare a high quality submission. Now more than ever, submissions need to stand out in the marketplace. We are very fortunate, yes, Marsh is big and Marsh has a great reputation in the marketplace, but we also need to make sure that the submissions that we submit to the insurers are of high quality, do get to the top of the pile, does get the underwriter's attention for the reasons that I've mentioned. Consider alternative program structures, risk finance optimization analysis. There's never been a better time to analyze and look at how you do things, for us to all collectively step outside the box and really consider what the program looks like and can we make a change that will ease some of the restrictions that we're seeing. For our colleagues, we need to understand clients' outstanding claims and lessons learned. A claim run that doesn't look particularly attractive now in this market can make life really difficult. So we need to make sure that we've got a firm handle on the claims, the causes, the things that are being done to mitigate going forward so that we can convey that to the insurers. We need to make sure that we're focused on risk management, achievements and plans. So as you, our clients, all the great things that you're doing to mitigate risk, we need to make sure that we have a really firm understanding of that and make sure that we're conveying that to the underwriters and to the market. We're encouraging our colleagues internally to involve senior leaders as needed. I don't think there's ever been another time where senior leaders within Marsh are getting more involved than ever to make sure that we are getting the deals done for our clients that we need to get done. And again, this very difficult marketplace. Establish high quality claims and servicing proposals. We need to make sure that on go forward, things are tight and that things are laid out and how things are going to work. And we need to make sure that those are two key items that we stick to. And very important, number 10, stick to the plan and agreed milestones. And this is for our internal colleagues to hold you, our clients, accountable to the dates. And so when we agree to a plan, to make sure that, you know, we are chasing, we are getting the information when we need it. So that brings me to our next box here, the key takeaways. So this is more takeaways for you, the clients, for key strategies in managing the market. So there's never been a better time to align your business goals, strategy, and internal pressures to the renewal strategy. So again, we need to take the time up front to make sure that the way things are moving and how the market is continually evolving and how your businesses and industries are evolving, we need to make sure that that clear understanding is making up and forming a large part of the renewal strategy. We need to collectively take a critical review of coverage requirements, policy limits, retentions. There are programs there that, you know, have a low deductible or retention because we could. The market pricing didn't make sense at the time to take on more. We need to look at that differently now. And we need our clients to let us know what they're comfortable with, what they can take on. Again, our job is to provide you the data and the information to make an educated decision around that. But we need to take a more critical review of coverage requirements. Some coverages are required by way of contract with some of the folks that our clients do business with. We need to be clear on what those are. We need to prepare ahead for different outcome scenarios. We need to ask our clients, you know, we need to plan for the worst. As we manage to get the best deal in the marketplace, we do need to plan for different outcomes and to be prepared. Everything has to be on the table at all times. We don't want to provide surprises last minute, which means we need to make sure that we're preparing for all outcomes. Consider premium financing. Premium financing is not a new tool by any stretch, and it's something that probably everybody is familiar with. But I will say, in this market, given everything that's going on in the economy, I would consider and take a second look at premium financing. There are no risks or clients that are too big or too small to look at this option. And if it can provide some capital relief to you, our clients, then it's an option that we should consider. And it's worth getting a quote around terms on premium financing. We need to establish clear boundaries of non-negotiables. Again, this ties back to the critical review. We need to make sure that we know what we can work with in the market. As the market continually gets harder and harder, we need to give up some coverages in order for premium relief. We need to be clear what's non-negotiable early on in the process. And we need to confirm alignment frequently. So we need to make sure that we're talking, we need to make sure that we're open, transparent, and honest throughout the entire process. We at Marsh are on your side. We work for you. It's our job to communicate to you and therefore get that communication and honesty back from you as far as what's going on within your business. What items do we need to know? Is there new claims activity? We need to know as much information as quickly as possible throughout the entire process. Next slide, please, Phoebe. So I would say, given the way that the market has changed and continues to change, there's never been a more important time to stay up to date and educated with what's going on in the marketplace. So what we've provided here again, so this is where if you can pull your phone out and actually toggle your camera app over each one of these little boxes, it will link you directly to each one of these items. So I would really encourage, and it's probably not possible to get all 5 now, but we will send this out to everybody on the call so you can have it. There are some things here that are really helpful, that will really help you continually. Your client teams are there to educate you, answer questions as needed. But again, Marsh has done a really good job of pulling together a lot of information. For instance, the Pandemic Risk Hub. There's a lot of white papers. There's a lot of information on there to make use of within your organizations. I'd also point you directly to the Practical Guide to Returning People to Workplace Safety. As we start to reopen the economy, there is a lot of great tips that you can use internally within your organizations as a best practices guide to really help some of that work along. There's some good information in here on premium financing. There's a great Q&A and some information in there to help you get your head around some of the elements and the mechanism of premium financing and how it works. The risk outlook and the preliminary mapping and its implications of COVID-19. That's a report that was done with the World Economic Forum in partnership with Zurich that I really encourage everyone on this call to download and have a read of. There's some great stuff in there. And again, Nathan mentioned early on the Global Insurance Market Index, which gives some background to the pricing that we're seeing globally and the pressure on rates that we're seeing. So I really encourage everybody, if you can, to go in and have a read of that. And again, I can't stress enough to please just communicate with your client teams. Ask as many questions as humanly possible. In this marketplace, as difficult as it is, there is absolutely no stupid questions. And everybody is stretched, but I can also assure you that all of our client teams are working harder than ever to make sure that we're getting you the best deal in the marketplace, despite the challenges, and communicating the best we can. So with that, Nathan, I'll pass back to you.
Thanks, Grant, and you know, great commentary and tactics in there. And yeah, it is a difficult market. So let's get on and answer some of those questions that have come in. So thank you. There has been a constant stream of questions coming through on the Q&A button. So just a reminder for those on the bottom of your screen, if you liven your screen with your mouse, then you'll get a Q&A pop-up and you can type a question in there. So we can't get through all of the questions today because we have had a number come through. We will send a response after the webinar. And one just in the chat, yes, we will make these slides available with the recording of the webinar. So just to the first question, if I can. First question that came in was just through, is there a preliminary cost estimate of potential claims arising due to COVID-19? As mentioned earlier, so there is a huge range out there at the moment, but you know, somewhere the midpoint is sitting around 50 billion is the estimates. That does vary per insurer, per market, and you know, it's, I guess even at 50 billion, to put it in context, Katrina is the single largest loss into the market from a single event, was 80 billion. So you know, it's certainly a significant impact. Question here for Ruby, please. Does Marsh have guidelines on underwriting submissions regarding cyber, and what markets are most interested in to know from the clients regarding cyber controls? Ruby, over to you.
Sure, thanks, Nathan. I did respond to the question live, but I'm happy to share. Absolutely. Based on the risk in the industry that the client's risk belongs to, there could be different levels of controls that the markets expect. So what we do is we work with the clients to highlight what would be the key focus area for the underwriters or for the markets, and review the responses prior to even seeking out terms. Sometimes it's a matter of clarifying a question or how the question is being responded to, maybe a little bit more color. As you know, many times insurance applications is a yes or a no or a checklist approach. Unfortunately, that approach is not working in the current marketplace. So we're working with our clients to focus on one, key cybersecurity controls, add some more context to it. You know, if its answer is no, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad answer, it's a wrong answer. Sometimes it's just a matter of providing context because something else might work for our clients. So we're paying attention to that before we go back to the market with responses.
Thanks, Ruby. And just as a follow-up, what sort of resources is Marsh offering in terms of analytics and peer segment review and support to improve submission quality? I believe this is connected to the previous cyber question for you.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we have both peer benchmarking available, which provides an industry view of how much limits and how much premium our certain peers within your industry group are buying cyber insurance. Note of caution, though, these are peer benchmarking only provides direction. We always recommend that our clients take a look at the benchmarking, but then assess internally if it's truly realistic for their risks. Because you know, it's a wider scope or wider segment of peer groups that's reflected. But we are happy to provide that information to our clients too.
Thank you. Andrea, one for you on directors and officers, and it's about managing, essentially just managing the communication, I believe, internally. So the question, not quite clear in its wording, but essentially I think it is about how can we help clients manage that internal messaging for their boards and their stakeholders when we're talking about some fairly significant changes in insurance pricing.
Well, as I said before, communicate early, communicate often. Work with your Marsh team to be in touch with the market early. A lot of the time, there is a story that makes sense for the changes that are happening, and the real problem is surprise or short timelines. So, like Grant said, pester your team. There are no stupid questions. Your Marsh team can help you see data that's reflects what's going on in the marketplace. It can help you communicate internally, be it through presentations or just a conversation.
Perfect, thank you. Another question here, any discussions on building captives to increase property capacity? So yes, captives have their place absolutely and can be, I guess, a key tool for the right client. I think it's important to have a clear captive strategy over a time period that makes sense, because captives are typically long-term risk transfer vehicles, but there are many alternative risk transfer options out there, and we'd be happy to advise if there's any client-specific follow-up that we can do for that. But yes, in general, captive conversation is starting to become more prevalent as the market hardens. So just through the next one, Grant, one for you maybe here. So you mentioned to a review of risk and getting, to taking a critical review of the client's risk. There's a question here, which is, what risk review can Marsh offer before renewal, and when will we need to complete this work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, I mean, there's a couple things we can do. So again, it gets very specific around, one, the easy answer is we need to start it as early as possible. So I would suggest engaging your client team early to have this discussion, to see specifically what might best apply to you and your specific company and industry. But there's risk optimization studies that can be done to see, what is the deductible retention that makes the most sense, given a number of inputs that might be done. Again, Ruby mentioned a little bit, there's benchmarking that can be looked at. We have a team of people internally that are very industry focused, that specifically look at particular industries and can comment on best practices, on a review of the risk, that can look at how you're going to be sold into the market, how the underwriters will review, and what the new, to be honest, what the recommendations that are changing on a daily basis from a risk improvement standard. Insurers are getting a lot more critical than they've been, and I'm sure everybody on this call has felt that. So, having our team run through that, before the underwriters take a look or before they send out their loss control people, I think is paramount in being prepared the best way we can for the conversation. But start early, for sure.
Thanks, Grant. So look, that's all we have time for today, and I'd really like to thank our panelists for participating in the discussion. And again, thank you to all of our clients for joining us during what we know is a very busy and challenging time for everybody. Rest assured that as the market and the current global pandemic evolves, Marsh & McLennan will continue to support all of our clients, including helping you to anticipate potential insurer reactions and positions and changes, and along with always advocating on your behalf in any interactions we have with your insurers. Again, we will be sending out this information about how you can access the replay of this webinar in about 24 hours from now. And we encourage you to again visit any of our resources pages. And if you weren't able to get the QR codes, essentially just visit marsh.ca and you can link your way through to the majority of our content there, or simply search on LinkedIn. You'll get a social media feed on the majority of that content. So thank you all very much again for joining us, and have a great day.